And so let's start out with a little history.
Okay.
And about 1993, there were no listings on the internet. As a matter of fact, back in 1993, there was no browser, really, any commercial browser, so people didn't access the web. And Netscape in circa 1995 created a browser that people could use and put it out there and offered it for free. And in 1996, August 9th, 1996, Netscape went public and the age of the World Wide Web was off and running. And the National Association of Realtors, through Realtor.com, started to aggregate information and put it on a website viewable to the public. And then in November of 2001, the idea surfaced that it might be good for brokers and their agents, at the broker's discretion, to display listing data on their websites as a form of advertising. And as long as we agreed, if we were, John and I, the member of the same MLS, and we agreed to display each other's listings as advertising on our websites, that we should have the MLS itself provide a data feed to our website providers, and I could display John's listings on my website and vice versa. Now, obviously, to do that, you would need some rules and who owned the listing and the phone numbers and the email addresses, and do you need that contact information and do you not? So in November of 2001, the National Association of Realtors promulgated its IDX rules. And IDX stands for?
Internet Data Exchange.
Internet Data Exchange. And so that was the idea that if you were a member of an MLS, you could exchange, you could show all the listings in the MLS on your website, actually a subset of the data, not all the MLS data, but a subset, just like when you run your ad in the paper, you run a subset of the data, and that you could run other brokers' listings on your website, and that was known as IDX, Internet Data Exchange.
And it really facilitated getting the permission of the other brokers to display their listings on your property. Otherwise, you had to do it on a one-on-one basis. So IDX really is one in which people could give blanket permissions.
Well, and a really good point is you didn't have to allow it.
Yeah.
And so there were two very important terms when we were first starting about IDX. And by the way, before they called it IDX, Brian Larson came up with the term broker reciprocity. And it was a reciprocity arrangement. I'll give you mine, you give me yours. And so two terms that came out of this were opt-in and opt-out. And you could opt in and allow other brokers to display your listings, or you could opt out.
Now, if you opt out, that's a way that you can get more brokers quickly to be participating, because everybody in the MLS would be part of it, but they could elect to opt out.
So it started by just the concept of sharing, and then it was thought, maybe some people wouldn't want to share. And since the broker owns the listing, the broker ought to have the right to say who they share with. And so the MLS has set up IDX feeds that allowed brokers to either opt in or opt out. And that was the point you were making. But this can be a little bit confusing because it seems like the opposite of what you might think.
I know.
So if the MLS was set up under an opt-out, what they did was they took all the listings, they allowed all the brokers to have them, and if you didn't want your listings displayed on other brokers' websites, you opted out. So those MLSs started with all the listings on all the brokers' websites until somebody opted out. The other model was opt-in, where the MLSs said, okay, brokers, you can agree to share listings, but you have to tell us you want to do that, and as you tell us, as you opt in, we will allow the sharing to take place. So there was opt-out and opt-in, and I believe at the time, though, it was blanket, wasn't it? You couldn't singly just opt out, or you had to do this. It was all or nothing, wasn't it?
It was an all or nothing concept.
So IDX was a new way for brokers to display lots of listings on their website. And why would they want to do that? Because consumers, when they go to real estate websites, they want to look at listings. And if you're a broker in the real estate industry, where do you want them to go? You want them to go to broker websites and agent websites. You don't want them to go into some third-party vendor's website to look at your listing because a listing is a marketing asset. And so brokers were agreeing to share all their information, and IDX was off and running, and it was on its way to being very successful. And then what happened in around 2002 time frame, in some markets where brokers decided not to share their listings, some entrepreneurs decided they were going to take the listings anyway. And they would just take the feed and they would explain this as, I've created a website that is just like my office. We'll call it a virtual office. And we'll contrast it to, or compare it to, a real office, which everybody referred to as a bricks and mortar office. And so in those marketplaces where brokers didn't want to share, other brokers, technologically maybe more advanced brokers, maybe not, but maybe, decided they were going to take the MLS data anyway, and they were, even if the brokers in their MLS didn't want to share, and they were going to put that information on their website, make it available to the public, and say to any broker that said, you can't use my listing, say to that broker, how ridiculous. I show people your listings every day when they walk into my office. I have an MLS book, or I have a computer printout, then I show people the listings. And so I'm just going to now show it to them on the internet. And since I show them the listings in my office without getting your permission, you see, when you join the MLS, when we joined the MLS, we gave everybody permission. And so because I'm a member of the MLS, I have the right to do this.
And you're saying my office is in this virtual space, this website.
It's a website. And so I'm calling this a virtual office, and I'm putting your listings on my website whether you like it or not. You don't have any choice. And so there was a lawsuit because MLSs said, we're not going to do that. And the members of the MLSs were forcing some of the brokers that had these virtual office websites out of the MLS. And NAR was asked to please help and come up with some guidelines.
Yeah, there was a feeling of loss of control over your data if, it goes into somebody's virtual website and then they can do anything
and
they
people
want.
were confused with, well, how does this differ from IDX? Well, IDX you had to have permission, and then VOWs, well, you could do this without permission. And then what fields? Because IDX was a subset of data, and with the VOW concept, the VOW concept, brokers were taking information, and they were taking some confidential information even at the time, and displaying what would otherwise be confidential information on the internet, jeopardizing or putting people at risk, actually, in some cases.
Yeah, things like, the children are away at school, or...
yeah, the key's under the door.
Yeah.
The key's under the mat. Help yourself. And so things you wouldn't ordinarily let people see in a business-to-business network, which is really what an MLS is. This VOW, this new concept of a virtual office website, was like putting all the information out there, and the brokers had no control over what other brokers would use their data and how they would use their data. So NAR came up with a VOW policy. Now this really, again, as I said, it confused people because now first of all, there was an IDX policy, Internet Data Exchange. Exchange starts with E, by the way, not X. But an IDX policy, Internet Data Exchange. And now we had NAR comes out with a VOW policy. And in the VOW policy, NAR said that brokers ought to have the right to opt in and opt out, much the same as they had the right to do in IDX. And the Department of Justice did not like that.